All right, guys, welcome to another episode. It's an absolute pleasure to have your company, Matt Hamilton, with you again. Let's get into it. I had somebody ask me for some advice with respect to a situation where they're coming in to lead a team, a new team, and they have heard through the grapevine that there's a disruptive employee member within that team, and the reputation of this person sort of preceded them. And the question is, how do I handle that? So I wanted to just give a real quick rundown as to some techniques that I would employ in that situation. I have actually been in a very similar situation before, so I'll recount that story and then perhaps that will answer this question. So I worked in a company, a facilities management company, and I was aware of a team that was closely aligned with mine under the same organization. And there was an individual in that team that was particularly disruptive, okay? Particularly nasty piece of work at times. Would be the nicest person you've ever met the one day and then just a completely different person the next day with little to no explanation as to what had caused that mood swing. Now, looking back, I'm pretty convinced that this person had some sort of issue, whether it was a bipolar disorder or something of the kind. I can only assume, because it was literally like dealing with two completely different people from one day to the next. So, as luck would have it, I got tapped on the shoulder after there was a leadership vacancy for a prolonged period of time, and I was asked to step in and lead this team. Now, knowing that this person's reputation preceded them, I had some reservations about leading this team. And the first thing I did was try and recruit as much information as I could to A, confirm my suspicion, and B, just get as much information on the topic as possible. So what I did was relatively, sort of personal, in the sense that I was able to conduct one-on-one meetings with just about every team member, because the team was small in size. It was under 10 people. And I did that ahead of me coming into the role so that I could touch base with those employees and find out if there were any commonalities with respect to things that they thought needed to change within the team. So I went and grabbed a coffee with each of them before I formally was installed in the role. And I asked them quite simply, what are the top 3 things in your mind that you want me to address coming into this role? And every single one of them mentioned this individual and said that they would find the workplace a lot more pleasant to operate in if he was brought in line. And they went on to say that previous managers had failed to do so, whether it was because they were intimidated or it was just put in the too hard basket, who knows? But it was the common feedback across numerous people in a team of 7. Okay, so that told me all that I needed to know. We have multiple people corroborating, the same story, essentially, which is a pretty good indication that there's something to see here. So I went into the role armed with the information that they gave me, and aware that it was something that was really on the team's mind and that previous leaders had failed to address. So I had a mandate going in. Now, very importantly, okay, I was determined to wait and see if this person would exhibit this behavior on my watch. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You can't just go in and go, look, I've heard you've been doing this, and so, this is the disciplinary procedure that we're going to run through. That's not fair to them, and it's unprofessional. Okay, you have to make sure that the behavior reported is actually being carried out. You've got to give them a shot, a fresh slate, okay, because you're a new leader and you're getting to know each other. So that's what I did. But in preparation for that moment, I got to know the disciplinary procedure and the code of conduct very, very well, so that when the time came, I would be ready, okay, to roll that out. I also had a couple of really good meetings with our HR team and briefed them on the situation. Said, listen, I've spoken to the team one-on-one, individually, independent of each other. And they've all said that they need this to be dealt with and that it's gone on for a long time. And then I've briefed them on what I thought was an appropriate course of action and sought their input. And so we've worked together as a team, okay, to ensure that if the situation arises whereby this guy acts in a way that's inappropriate, we're able to take action without delay and we're all on the same page. Now, for context, the sort of behaviour that was being exhibited was actually just downright abusive at times. It was abusive to members of his own team, verbally abusive, crazy as it was at the time. He was even abusive to customers at times, and just generally a really nasty person to be around. Okay, so about a month went by. I didn't see any evidence of this behaviour, maybe some slight mood swings, but nothing serious. And then eventually the time came where he decided to test me. Okay? This guy's used to getting away with things, so he decided to test me. All right? And that was the time when I knew that I had to act and act quickly to let him know that there was a line in the sand. All right? So I gave him a verbal warning. All right, very simple to do under the policy that was in place at the time, being a private sector organisation. The policy was 1 verbal warning followed by 3 written warnings, and then you're out the door if you are not able to rectify the behaviour in that time span. Okay, so the verbal warning, very simple, very clear. Invite him in to a private meeting room or office. That's very important. Explain to him the behaviour that you observed. Tie it back to the code of conduct and explain why it is not acceptable and that this is a verbal warning, and then clearly explain the next steps. All right? Emailing him and the HR department after the fact, noting that you had the meeting, noting what the meeting was about, and noting the outcome of the meeting, which is that it was a verbal warning. They were the actions that I took and the ones that I recommend you take. All right. Then he told me all that, I wanted to hear. Yes, I know I was wrong. Won't happen again. All the things I wanted to hear. But a short time later, the exact same behaviour, if not a little bit worse, was reported to me, and I had to pull him again. And I pulled him in, and this time it was a little bit different because it was going to be a written warning. Okay? But I did something that I think is good practice, okay, for something like this. I made sure that a third party was in the room. Okay, now normally for something like this, the employee that you're dealing with has the right to have a representative in there with them if they want. On this occasion, we went with a HR-approved person to take notes, and we took notes regarding the contents of the meeting. We ran it in a very official way. And again, I tied it back to the code of conduct. This is why we're here. This was the behaviour reported. This is why it's unacceptable. Tying it back to specific paragraphs in the code of conduct. Objective and evidence-based is what we're trying to achieve here. Emotion doesn't have any part in it. Now, it's fair to say that if at this point you've gone through a verbal warning, you've gone through a written warning, and you still don't see any notable change, you're probably not going to. All right, this person will probably end up moving on, looking for other roles when they realise that you're not going to put up with this behaviour, and the game's up. Okay, they're probably disgruntled for reasons that are totally beyond your control. Having said that, I do just want to return to the verbal warning part of the conversation. That really is the time to put the coach's hat on, okay? As a leader, it is your job to mentor and coach the people that you lead. That's one of the most rewarding parts of the job, okay? You're not just going to go in there and wave a big stick and demand that people respect your authority. That's not what it's about. Okay, part of the joy of being a leader is being a mentor and being a coach and trying to bring people who just aren't getting it or aren't conforming to the sort of behavioural principles that we need to see. Part of the joy of leadership is getting them on board and turning a ship around And it can be done. Okay? But if you're going to go down that path, the verbal warning stage is a fantastic time to do it. Dig a little bit deeper into the behavior. Hey, I've noticed that you're, sort of a bit aggressive towards people and you seem really frustrated. Like, what's that about? Is everything okay? Is something going on outside of work that you want to talk about that's contributing to this? Is something going on inside of the workplace? What's going on? Come at it from a place of curious compassion. Now, having said that, if you've done all that and you get to the stage where the behavior still continues and you're going into sort of first and second written warning territory, it's probably a lost cause. Okay? But the point of this is that the person concerned, especially in the context of having previous managers who haven't done anything about it, they now have a decision to make because you've made it very clear that you are willing to have a difficult conversation, unlike their previous managers. You made it clear that you're not going to let the behavior continue, and you've been really professional and clinical about it from the beginning. Not only are you having these conversations, but you're actually documenting it. This is going to be something that people can look up. Has this occurred before? Maybe you're on leave, right? Maybe you have to exit the position for whatever reason to seek a better opportunity. Someone pulls up this record and they can see that, oh yeah, this is a pattern. On this date, this person was pulled up for this. And it was their first or second warning. That's powerful. It shows professionalism. All right. And as I said, the individual concerned will probably be looking to move on because they're disgruntled and just don't want to be there, or they realise that the game is up. But in closing, what's really important about not being afraid to take on an issue of this kind is that, one, you get the satisfaction of knowing that you're preserving the standards in the workplace. Two, you're giving this person the best chance possible to turn around and make something of themselves. You never want to see someone self-destructive. Okay, it's always better to get that person up to the standard that we need them. Because if they leave, A, it's not as satisfying, and B, it means you've got to go through the recruitment process again. And also, that bad attitude that this person has, interestingly, doesn't mean they're bad at their job. I've seen that before as well. Someone who's actually quite good at their job, but just a really difficult person to be around in general. Okay, but unfortunately, you can't really let that be an excuse for not dealing with it. Okay, what good is it being great at your job if you make the life of all those around you a living hell? It's not on. But what's really crucial about this is that you've taken the time to sit down with your team. They've communicated something to you. They've probably thought to themselves, well, no one else has ever dealt with this before, so what makes us think that this guy's going to? And by actively demonstrating that you are prepared to have difficult conversations and that you are prepared to do something about bad behavior, you win their trust and you draw a line in the sand. Everybody knows the point at which they shall not cross. Okay? You establish and maintain standards. And as a leader, that wins you respect. And it ensures that the standard of your workplace is maintained. And that is absolutely crucial. If you are not willing to have these conversations as a leader, as harsh as it may sound, you're in the wrong job. You're in the wrong job. Okay? Vacate and let somebody who is prepared to have these conversations and do the right thing by the wider workforce, let them do the role. Maybe this isn't for you. That's the harsh truth, but it is one that needs to be considered. Guys, I hope that helps, and thank you very much for joining me once again. I'll see you for the next one.